I mean, I thought I was gonna die. Well, I literally thought I was scared to death, and I thought that I was gonna fall in that metal and burn up.
Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podcast Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. Remy Hanemann is today's guest, and I am completely enthralled by the story of how, against all odds, he came to be an accomplished artist and iron caster. Remy, I am eternally grateful for having the honor to interview you about your life and how you persevered in the foundry world. Thank you for having this chat with me, and your belief in what I'm doing with this podcast really means a lot. Also, thank you to the sponsors of this show on Patreon. The financial support of Patreon members helps me provide this podcast to you, the listener, without the presence of any annoying advertisements. Well, without any further ado, for all of you listening or watching, thanks so much for tuning in, and please enjoy. Welcome to the podcast Iron, Remy Hanemann.
Thanks.
And first off, well, who the hell are you anyways?
All right. My name is Remy Hanemann, and I was born in South Louisiana, 60 miles south New Orleans. And I just came from my dad was like a hardcore lawyer, self-starter, and mom was just taking care of us. And it was a very strict household. You didn't go off and get a degree, let alone 2 degrees in sculpture. This is unheard of in that family. So it was really difficult growing up as an artist, as a young child or whatever, like doing it for a living, you know. So that was difficult, but I did it anyway, and I'm glad I chose it. I mean, life changes, things are constantly changing. Like you do one job, say it's a teaching job, and then it runs out, and then you have to go build some houses somewhere. That's what you do. And so that's kind of what I'm doing, restructuring my whole the art. The art. I don't really think about making art anymore. Like, not at all. I think about my garden, my girlfriend, catching fish, and my bees. You know, but one day again, I'm gonna keep keep pouring iron and keep making art, but it's not what I'm focused on right now. I'm going to school to become a certified welding inspector, and the goal is to be a certified welding educator. And yeah, that goes. I have to go through the American Welding Society, and it's a pain in the ass. But that's my goal. That's where my focuses are right now. But I'm all about talking about art and cast iron. But I think that was a good enough introduction.
No, that was great. And so I just wanted to kind of start with maybe your childhood. Usually I find that the people I meet in the cast iron art world have some predispositions in childhood or in early years of manual capabilities. So I was really good. My dad taught me how to use a hammer. And so I'm just interested to hear any overarching themes or a specific story or something about maybe growing up.
Yeah. My so there's this thing in every April called the spring fallout, and it's where migratory birds fly across the Gulf of Mexico from Central America, and the first place they land, if you're in their path, is a barrier island. And we have a barrier island about an hour's drive from here, hour and a half. And my parents were big birders, huge bird. That's all we did. They didn't go fishing or crabbing. That's why I went to the island, but they wanted to go watch birds. Uh, and sitting at one of these bird meetings at 5 o'clock in the morning before everybody heads out to hit the woods, um, I would draw birds from the bird book, and I drew them really well. And then that was just what kicked it off. That's like my first memory of something artistic that I did as a child, and it was drawing a black cap chickadee.
Was it good by your standards, or was there an adult that said,
No, I still have it. I still have it.
it's so good it was?
Yeah, everybody was like, "Oh God, you can draw." Oh, next thing you become a painter. Yeah.
Is that what happened?
No, hell no. I would never paint. That's Noah's department.
I feel like I'm digging into something like I have no idea what I'm gonna find.
Yeah, well, that's where it is.
So did that kick off more drawing, or
Yeah, I took drawing classes, and of course you don't. It's not like as a child you can take sculpture classes; they don't exist. It's like flat work, 2D, and so that's what I did, and then my parents gave me this book called the Foxfire series. Have you ever heard of it?
no?
It's like a 6 series novel of I think it was UNC Asheville back in the 30s or 40s. Went up into the mountains in North Carolina or in Appalachia and would record old the old people that lived up in the mountains. Would record their lifestyle and the book had drawings and interviews. So it's kind of like what you're doing now, but you know old school on a tape recorder and then written down in a book, and it tell you how to do everything, like how to skin a pig, how to make tinctures, how to do whatever. And one of the sections I really liked was how to build a log cabin, because I just loved that. And so I made miniature log cabins out of sticks in the backyard, and that was my attempt at 3D as a child. And then it just obsessed from there. you know
Yeah.
it got worse and worse and worse. The disease just got worse and worse, and before long I was a professional artist for too long. But I've gotten some help. I'm getting better.
Recovery in recovery, artist recovery.
I'm on sabbatical right now from art. Right.
Yeah. And I think everything in its turn has seasons.
Not in South Louisiana. It's hot. Hot, hot.
And so those log cabins, they were in elementary school, middle school. Were you like 12, 15?
Oh, probably 10.
And did they get bigger as you grew, or did you move to something
No,
else?
no. I actually learned about fire by lighting them on fire.
Yeah.
If you put a little fire in the living room, with little tiny toothpicks and stuff, you can look inside and see how the fire spreads and put it out real quick and light it again. It's pretty cool.
It sounds perfect for a 9 or 10. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've taught fire watch at safety schools. I have been a volunteer firefighter. I dig it. I dig fire. Anything to do with it.
It's exciting.
Yeah. Caveman TV.
That's the thing about going camping or something. It's like, well, what do you do? And sometimes friends nowadays will be like, well, what do you do? Do you have cell phone reception? And it's like, well, no. Well, do you have light? No. Once it gets dark, you just sit around the fire. You feed the fire, you watch the fire, you poke at the fire, you build, it's very, and you work together depending on who you're with. Or sometimes you're with freeloaders who don't actually know how to.
Or you just tell them, look, I'm a professional. You can keep your comments to yourself because you don't know what you're talking about. Just let me take care of the fire.
Yeah, hands to yourself. Keep your hands off the fire. It's my domain. Yeah. So in high school, was there continuing of?
Not really. I took art classes my junior and senior year. But before that, my parents shipped me off to boarding school, and there was no art. There was no art there.
Okay. Well, what was kind of your favorite thing about junior and senior year in art?
Nothing.
Nothing?
I hated it. I hated
Oh,
it all. Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't into it.
what did what didn't you?
I made A's, but my parents were going through a divorce.
We can just move on if you.
But I'm just saying I had a lot of shit going on when I was growing up, and art wasn't the thing that it was fun to do, but it wasn't the thing that I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna keep going. I wanted to go out in the swamp. I wanted to go hunting. I wanted to go fishing. I just want to get as far away from home as possible. And art did not rescue me then.
Mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm,
know,
mm-hmm.
it wasn't until undergrad. I graduated high school in 1987, and then went to school in photography. And I flunked out of photography. Uh, Went into architecture, flunked out of architecture. Changed my major like 5 times, and went back to photography, and then decided I had to take an elective, and I took a welding class. I was 2 hours from graduating with a degree in photography, and I took a welding class, and I stayed in sculpture after that, and got a double a double uh, double double degree. So I got a degree in photography and in sculpture. Yeah, and then it was all downhill after that.
Well, so it started off as welding. Where was this at?
It was in a. It was funny. My professor was an adjunct professor. We had the welding machines. We just kind of like pirated some space that wasn't ours. We just uh, the welding machines were hardwired into the electrical panel.
Oh,
There were no plugs. There were no plugs. We were in like an old classroom, and we had these big visqueen shields set up that the Sculpture One people were trying to. The Sculpture One people gave us a little tiny space, and we keep moving that curtain over further and further to try to push them
yeah.
out. We were rocking and rolling. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I cast my first bronze in aluminum in 1991.
But you never told me where you were at, unless you don't.
No, it was University of Jesus. It was called USL, University of Southwestern Louisiana, and it's now University of Louisiana at Lafayette.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you were in the welding class and you just keep.
I went to college for 8 years, 4 years in photo and another 4 in sculpture. And yeah, so after I did that, at that time I was making large scale sculpture. I was doing casting was cool, but it wasn't my thing. I was a fabricator,
Was that a
and
different class, the casting class?
they of course we had casting classes, metal casting one, metal casting two, but there was no iron. I never heard of that before. Um, but I just used it to make trinkets,
Mm-hmm.
to make miniature sculptures.
Okay.
And I didn't. This just wasn't my body of work. I was making large scale sculpture, 21 foot tall, with steel drill pipe, and making these massive bones, if you will, these big concrete bones that weighed 1,000 pounds, and I'd hoist them up on these. It had to do with the oil field uh, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But yeah, so when I graduated, I was scared shitless. I didn't know what I was going to do. My professor was like, just apply to grad school, man. So I applied to was it University of Tennessee in Knoxville and University of Southern Illinois in Carbondale.
Okay.
I applied to two schools. I got into both schools, and yeah, and then went from there. Does that is there more?
No, where did you go? I don't know where you went.
Okay. Sorry. Oh,
I don't know your origin story.
okay. Uh, so yeah, I ended up going to. I didn't like University of Carbondale. You know, I was making big stuff in undergrad, and I really wanted a teaching assistantship, and all they had for me was I don't know what they call it, where you work on the instructor's work instead of teach.
Okay.
You know, that's what you did. You worked on the instructor's work. I was like, I'm not doing that. I want to work on my work. You know,
Yeah.
so I went to UT Knoxville. That's where I ended up going.
And was there iron there?
No, no, there was not iron there. I'm self-taught.
Okay.
I didn't have a professor. There was no iron program set up where I went to graduate school.
Well, I think in your generation, that's pretty common for.
Unless you went to UGA, you know, or Georgia State, or you know, somewhere like that. University of Southern Illinois in Carbondale was a huge iron casting school at the time. Tom Walsh was the instructor over there. He was badass. But nothing at UT. So that was 1996. First person I see when I walked in that studio was Noah Kirby,
Noah Kirby.
and Durant Thompson. I don't know if you know him.
I do.
They were both undergrads while I was a grad student.
Durant was the first person to take me to Louisiana.
Oh, cool.
That's another story for another time.
You should have somebody from Louisiana bring you to Louisiana, and not somebody from Tennessee.
I was young and I needed to get to an iron, poor man.
I hear you.
Anyways, so you see them.
In '96, I see them, and I mean, I could have a whole interview just about the complexities of those two, but I won't.
All right. We'll let them talk about themselves.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll be good at it.
All right. All right. Let's keep the eye on the prize. You're the focus.
I love them.
I know you do.
But anyway, so our professor was Dennis Peacock. That was the guy that I wanted to learn from when I, you know, chose that school. There were other instructor professors there, but I care less. You know, there was a big University of Tennessee had a sculpture tour going on that Leanne was in charge of. Leanne worked there.
Leanne Mitchell.
My undergraduate professor lived with Jimbo and Leanne. You know, it was all connected. Jimbo, Leanne, my undergrad professor, you know, everybody knew each other. And so went to UT, and they had that awesome, you know, they were constantly bringing in famous artists, setting up their work. They'd have a talk with the sculpture students, whatever. And then they would leave, and then another sculptor would come in. It was just this huge ongoing sculpture program, you know.
Visiting lecture series or something?
No, I think it was called Sculpture Tour. And there were, I don't know, 30 life-size sculptures of all kinds on campus at all times on loan. And then, you know, one artist would come and pick up his work, and he'd have a talk, and he'd take off. Another artist would show up with a gooseneck trailer and the crane, and, you know, and it was just that it was really cool, you know, and that was my jam, doing that. But then one day, you know, early on in my first semester in grad school, my instructor says, my professor, sorry, that's trade school talk. The instructor.
Okay.
My professor said, so there's this. He's like, would you guys be interested in going to an iron pour? And I'm like, I don't know what's involved.
Was that Dennis Peacock?
Dennis Peacock at UT, yeah. He was friends with Jibbo and friends with Leanne, and of course that's where we were going to go. And one of the other grad students said, she worked with paper mache. She said, "You don't want to, you don't want to go to the iron pour. I did it. It's horrible. You stay up all night long. You're making molds. You're smashing iron. You're helping other people with their stuff, and you don't have any of your own stuff. Just don't go." And then everybody has a big party and stuff. Just don't do it.
It sounds terrible.
I'm like, that sounds like my kind of thing. Sounds like going to the hunting camp. Uh, so I went, and it was cool. It was really cool.
So you went to where was the iron port? It was at
Yeah, went to the Iron Tour at school. It was at UGA. And I don't know what the name of the furnace was or whatever, but it was I think it was the big one with the two blowers on it in a bull ladle.
what year was it?
96.
Okay. I'll have to look back in the records and see which ones he had then.
In those days, they had the stupid thing called a four-man ladle.
Oh dear.
Two people on the dead end and two people on the live end, on the driving end. So
No.
before the days of the jib crane,
Yeah.
you know,
Wow.
or any crane for that matter.
Okay.
And you'd have four people lifting up 500 pounds of metal and walking it around. It was like cuckoo.
Dang.
Yeah, yeah. But it was good. It was a great experience. I loved it. And we there was a pig roast after, or maybe it was roadkill, or I don't remember. But I went there so much after that. Like, I mean, I still kept up my fabrication. I still did bronze and aluminum. But I was really interested in cast iron. I don't know why. I think it could be because it was like a family gathering, you know,
Yeah.
and that really attracted me because my family, I never hung out and did stuff like that. But you go down to Moselle, Mississippi, and Skip Van Houten and his family do that sort of thing, and that was really the beginning. Like I didn't know that there were all these pours that you could go to at all these universities, like University of Southern Mississippi, where Skip was. Skip at home. He had a 32-inch ID furnace that ran on the gym. Somebody, I'm sure someone's going to correct me, but those blowers that they have at the bank that suck your cash up.
Yeah.
Is a thing. He had that type of blower hooked up to an old truck that he had welded in position behind his barn, and to turn on the blower for the furnace, he'd go start that car up and go put it in third gear, and then he's got air.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's like people like Skip Van Houten doing these pours. There was, I met so many people at 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 UGA. So many people that I'm my best friend, David Jones, Spivey, I met there. John Rawlerson, met so many other people whose names I forget because I'm old.
Well, there's probably also too many to even.
There's just so many people, it's just nuts. So, but still, we didn't have an iron furnace on campus, and what I had started doing was every free chance I got, I would go to an iron pour somewhere, and I would learn as much as possible about the furnace, how it's built, and how to run it. I could care less about those mold things on the ground. I'll learn that later. I want to learn how to build one of these things and run it. Uh, so all I did for the first 2 years of grad school was go to iron pours and help. I didn't bring molds. I wasn't concerned about my mold. Ran the furnace and did that. Like it's UGA. Those people at UGA when I first started going there, they were a little abrasive. You got to really push your way in. Like, excuse me, I'm trying to learn, and just let me teach me.
Yeah.
But the more I went, I started making friends. I started going to this place, and that place, all over. Like that was the thing. It was the season where you just went to an iron pour every weekend.
What were the other places besides UGA and
Tannehill, you know where Tannehill is?
Alabama, right?
Yeah. And Sloss came later.
Uh-huh.
And I frequented. That was not far from Knoxville where I live. So Sloss was pretty close. But I think LSU, University of Rio Grande, University of Ohio, where Matt and Biz, yeah, we would drive 6-7 hours just to go to an iron pour.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that was, see, how long was 96 ago? It was a long time. So I don't remember all the places that I went.
That's fine.
But I went to Jimbo's a lot. A lot. A lot. I remember their house when it was like a shack, multi-level, a floor with carpet and stuff. It was awesome. I loved every minute of it. I was always taken care of. I was always treated like a family at every iron pour I went to. But then I think I had a really good time in grad school. I was allowed a lot of freedom. And I just asked my professor, if I could build a cupola, and he's like, "Yeah, sure, you buy all the materials." And I was like, "I'll buy the metal, but you buy the refractory and the blower and all that kind of stuff." He's like, "No problem." So me, Noah, and Durant build this furnace, and we still don't know what we're doing. We know, any fabricator knows how to weld, but we built this furnace. It was a 14-inch furnace. I think it was a coupolette. I think it was Kurt Deerhog's design. Like, he would have drawings to give to people, but it's not his design. It's just something you see everywhere. It wasn't a risky furnace. It wasn't like a jacked up wind box or anything crazy. It was just, something that'll produce. Like mother's little helper, like a trusty little buddy.
Yeah.
So we built that, and first time we ran it, oh, it's so funny. I remember we're looking in the tweers. It was nighttime. Me, Allison, and Noah, and Durant, and we're looking in the tweers, and we're like, "Oh, I see metal. I see metal." We keep charging. An hour later, "Yeah, I see metal. You think we should tap it? I don't know. Should we? No, let's let it go a little while."
You're seeing the molten metal drip down in the tweers, like every time you'd open them.
Yeah, but we never tapped it.
Oh.
We didn't tap it for an hour.
Oh my.
And we go to tap it, like, we're so new at it. Like, we did, you have all these people that had professors that knew iron. And they're like, "Here, let me show you exactly how to do this." But it didn't really exist for us. It didn't exist. And so we're running this thing. You're like, "Oh yeah, well, let's check let's poke the tweers, and do all the stuff." But we never tapped it. And when we went to tap it, it was like clunk.
Oh yeah.
So it had a giant skull in it. We had to pull the line. It was like,
yeah, I know that sound when I hear it.
But then we would leave that and go to a pour and talk to somebody about what happened. And then we started videotaping everything that we did. We would have somebody videotape and take photographs of everything that we did, and we started keeping time. This was at UT. started keeping time and all that kind of stuff. And one day when bing, 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 it was like, we made it work. It worked, you know, like that was the first step. Getting hot metal and getting worrying about bowls was not the subject of importance at the time. It was like, well, okay, we got this going. And so, and I'm still doing my body of work and, going to all the stupid meetings and art history and all that,
Yeah.
But then I got to teach a casting class, and it was what was it, a bronze and aluminum investment. That's all we had. We didn't have ceramic shell, but we had this amazing little crane trolley thing that went from the investment room where you made your investments, and it would go into the foundry, and it was like a track. So we were making investments that were 36 inches in diameter and 4 feet high. Huge.
Yeah. Heavy.
But we didn't have to lift it. We had a forklift and we had cranes. So
yeah,
that didn't matter.
Cool.
Yeah. But I got to do an iron pour during the class at the end of the semester, at the end of that bronze casting class that I taught. It just worked. We got it. We figured everything out, with doing your times and measuring your iron, and there's so many things. Maybe we don't have enough air. We learn through trial and error doing that, and going to other schools to learn from them.
Mm-hmm. But only little bits, not the same as if you had been a student there.
No.
So when you did the iron pour, where's the students pouring iron also with you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was a class.
But I didn't did they make molds?
Oh yeah, we made molds with them at that point. It started off where we would run the furnace and just tap into the ladle and then pour the ladle back into the stack, just so they could get used to feeling molten metal, and we could get used to the furnace, and nobody had to worry about shit. Okay, next tap, let's make some ingots, and then just put the ingots back in the furnace.
Okay. Yeah.
There were no molds at first.
So you were doing your reps basically of the melting of the metal.
Right.
In like a low pressure situation, because
Right. Yeah. But the thing that was key to me was, at all these other schools, there were 99% of the time there were big men on the ladle. Our little ladle was probably 90 pounds. This was before the days of fiber ladles. You made it just a little bucket with two little spouts on it, and as light as possible. And then the women felt more comfortable doing it, and that seemed to be like a good thing, because the iron community back in from 96 to, well, it's probably still like that, but typically in those days you didn't see many women in it. You saw women, but there were no women. There was no women carrying these 500-pound ladles with no crane.
Which I think is understandable. It's
understandable, but just build something better, build something lighter that somebody else can, take a shot at. This is not a men's sport. And then we started. Toby was. I don't know if you know Toby Flores.
Yeah.
He was making these experimental ladles with fiber fracts and I don't know, and ceramic shell, maybe, I don't know, and
yeah.
And so we started messing with that, and then way down the road, 20 years later, fiber ladles were coming out.
Yeah. All of a sudden, yeah.
I see it as a flash. It's like 20 years, like boom, gone. You don't even remember what happened.
Mm-hmm.
How you got there.
Were you having your students do sand molds?
Oh God, yes. We got really
okay.
We got good. They eventually started doing sand molds. I started learning about sand molds and strapping and how to use that damn strapping thing. I'm a professional.
Good.
And then we started just inviting people. I remember there was a time where the same thing. It's curious when you teach iron casting to new people. Uh, you tend to run out of things to put metal in.
Yeah.
They'll make one or two molds, and that's it. And what you want as somebody running the show is to learn as much as you can about the furnace. So we started inviting people, and Durant would drive up from LSU. His entire thesis show was all poured by my students.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And we would.
I mean, he was there too, right? He was there too.
No, he was at LSU going to graduate school.
Oh.
And he would drive up from Baton Rouge with a shit ton of molds on his flatbed.
Yeah.
And I would have my metal class, and we would pour our iron into his molds. Like, my students didn't have any of their own molds. We'd have a Durant pour. I think we did it 8 times.
And you got to practice on the furnace.
And they got to practice pouring molds, and it was perfect for us.
Good.
It was perfect.
You taught the casting class and you had poured a bunch with your students.
I introduced the iron casting program to University of Tennessee, basically, is what I did.
Yes.
And see, in I think 97, I was at an iron pour at UGA, and I had become friends with Matt Wicker and Elizabeth Cronfield.
Yeah.
And they were just so open, there was no secret, and they're like, we went to an iron pour, went back, spent the night at Jimbo's, the usual thing. And then the next morning they were like, hey, you want to go with us to Sloss Furnaces? They're having a pour. And I had heard of Sloss before, but didn't know anything about it. But I thought that they're like, yeah, they're tapping 2,000 pounds. And I was like, oh, what? You want me to go where? I mean, I thought I was going to die. Well, I literally thought I was scared to death. And I thought that I was going to fall in that metal and burn up, but it wasn't like that at all when I got there.
Good.
It was Eric Johnson.
Okay.
Have you heard of him?
I've heard the name. I don't know if I've met him.
He's deceased.
Then he may have been gone before I became a part of the community,
Yeah, Eric Johnson and Matt Eaton.
Oh, I know Matt Eaton.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was.
Those two were running the pour. I think it was for an open studio, and we just went to help out. I don't remember where I was during that pour, but I know I was involved, maybe hoist or something. I don't remember. I definitely didn't do the charging stand thing where they throw all the virgins, I'm pretty sure I broke iron and got charges together. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. And then I developed a relationship with those Sloss people, after that. And so then it was anytime, like during grad school, when I wasn't pouring and I needed molds, or my students need molds, I'd find out who was pouring. And if it happened to be Sloss, I'd just go to Sloss or go to Jimbo's or go to University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, or, do your thing, So after I got out of grad school, I taught at University of Tennessee for a couple of years in the sculpture program. And I was also applying to, I think there were 50 jobs in CAA the year I graduated, which was 99. Do a couple jobs, you do like what you can. You do like a visiting artist thing here, visiting artist thing there. You move all over the country, trying to get your tenure track position.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes sometimes it just doesn't work out, you know, to do that. So you have to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
And well, that's what it was. I got married when I was 30,
Mm-hmm.
and then we left Knoxville, moved to Pennsylvania, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But we were driving. We lived 60 miles south of Pittsburgh. So one day we were driving to Pittsburgh, and we passed up a huge foundry,
Uh-huh.
and I was unemployed. So I went in and I filled out an application. And what I wanted to do was work on the floor and make molds. But the guy came out of his office once I gave him the application, and he said, looking at my application, "You got a college degree?" And I said, "Yeah, man, I got two of them." And he says, "Okay, look, we're gonna hire you. You're gonna be a company man. You're gonna wear a white hard hat. We're gonna put you in assistant head of sales." And so my job was, we had two 36,000-pound induction furnaces.
Wow.
We could pull 30,000 pounds of metal out of each one, and our biggest ladle was 60,000 pounds of iron.
Whoa.
And my job was so companies would send in blueprints, and my job, they trained me to figure out how I get a blueprint, and I'd figure out how much it weighed in iron.
Okay.
So it was all this math. And then I had to figure out how big of a flask to put it in, like how big the cope and drag had to be, finish time, machine time, transport, all that stuff. It was crazy. It was crazy. These guys, we had these molds that were the size of a house, and I'm not I'm not blowing this out of proportion. We had molds that were 6 school buses big, and we were making all classes of ductile iron. We were making tempered iron. We were making I mean, you name it, we made it. We started out with, we were charging steel scrap, because in industry you can't find cast iron scrap, so you use steel scrap. And I mean, it was, these guys were. I remember when I first went to a pour at work, they had a 45,000-pound ladle being lifted by this crane, and the guy that was pouring it had on blue jeans and a green bean shirt, and a like a little grinding thing, not in hard hat, no leather, nothing. Just sitting there pouring, and it's this giant freaking mold. Uh, they were they had some sort of an amazing machine. You press a button and the resin comes out already mixed,
Okay.
and it gets blown into this thing, and then they pack that, and they come back with just regular sand, and I guess pack that into the mold around the sand mold. That's like the mother mold or whatever. But they would be pouring the metal into this massive pour cup the size of a kitchen table, you know.
Oh my God.
And then guys going around with bamboo sticks, lighting the vents on fire.
Why?
Well, you think about it, that iron is going inside that mold. It's burning off all the resin. Flammable gases are coming out.
Yeah.
So you should light that on fire to pull that gas out,
Yeah.
so you can allow metal to take its place.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So that job was pretty cool. And while I was at that job, I helped. Was it University of Morgantown? Was it University of West Virginia in Morgantown, West Virginia? And I helped them do pour some brass for Cass Scenic Railroad, these old historical stuff. And I started hanging out with them, and the next thing you know, I get a job at West Virginia University teaching metal casting, metal fabrication, and sculpture one. And so I quit that foundry job, even though I was, assistant head of sales. I was making a very good salary, but the disease kicked in, the teaching and art making disease kicked in. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go do this other thing that I really love. And so I did that. And then I built another furnace for West Virginia University. Well, I built it for myself, but I took it to school.
Yeah.
And we had, I had again, some good students. They would be your, you really didn't Noah teach you?
No, Jimbo.
But how you know Noah?
Oh man, that's another story for another.
But is that St. Louis?
No, I met Noah in Hayes, Kansas at the Western Conference.
Because Noah introduced me to you.
Yes.
And I was just trying to figure out what that connection was.
But I remember you coming to the University of Georgia.
Okay.
For one of the invitationals. It wasn't the last one that he had, but it was the first one that I witnessed.
Okay.
And I talked about it in well, as of this recording, it will have been 2 podcast episodes ago with my buddy that I went to grad school with. We talked about.
I like that guy. That was a great interview.
I'm glad you think that. I love him too. And he's one of my best friends. So yeah. But you came to that iron pour, and I remember like very similar, like the iron pour and all the people and the party afterwards. And you might even remember, do you remember the birthday cake that was shaped like the iron furnace that Leanne had made? Yeah. Right. And it had a little bit of iron, like the first iron on the table, like not even connected to the cake. It was just like frosting.
Yeah.
Shoot. Anyways. And so then I remember like the next day, because Jimbo would always say, you can't open your molds until the next morning.
Right.
And I get that. I still do that to this day. And I know he's watching this interview right now.
Yeah.
But I after I went on to my own thing and seeing other people, they open their molds. Like sometimes I feel like, irresponsibly early, but that's just my,
it depends on them. It depends on the mold. And I get that. After started working at Schloss and see these people opening up their molds and they break the piece or or they lose it, or they open it and molten iron spills out of it, so I get it.
And I still, even if I'm at pretty much no matter where I am, except for one exception, because I kind of got bullied, God bless them over there, but I will wait until the next day and open mine the next day. Sure. But I kind of suspect that, and Jimbo's going to be like, he wanted us to come back. Like he wanted us, because we had to sweep all that sand that we spread out. We had to like sweep it.
Oh yeah. The clean. I remember.
Like he didn't make us sift it. Like I know some people were big sifters, or maybe it was sifted, but not by me, because I wasn't a graduate student under him. I was a graduate student in a different area.
I'm so thankful that I was never involved in any cleanup, because I just can't imagine, because there was sand everywhere.
That was the thing, was we all showed up the next day after the party.
No, not me. I didn't show up.
No, your molds were broken open. The iron was gone and you were gone.
Oh.
And I was like, who was that guy anyway?
Some asshole.
They were like, don't worry about it. If you stay in this community long enough, you'll meet him again. And then it wasn't until, now this doesn't have to be about like how I met you, but
no, I hear you.
But then it wasn't until probably you I really was more memorable much later because I'd been in the community for longer. And so then that's when
Yeah,
Noah,
it was at Sloss. It was at Sloss.
yeah.
I was up in Pennsylvania working at West Virginia University as a sculpture tech, and then Durant says, "Hey man, there's a job. It's a sabbatical replacement at University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. And do you want to come? You want to apply?" And I was like, "Well, I don't need any arm twisting, you know." So I applied, got the job, and we built a was a 24-inch furnace. And the cool thing about that class was you didn't have to be a sculpture major. We had engineers in there, mathematicians, electricians, um, science majors, chemistry majors, and a couple sculpture majors. And all I had to do was say, "Okay, how many bricks are we gonna need in this thing? Y'all figure it out." And they'd figure it out. They figure out exactly what angle the bricks need to be in the furnace. They figured out everything. It was awesome. And then of course they all got to weld. We all just welded this big furnace together. Yeah, it was really cool. But so after that, I got a divorce
Hmm.
and then moved to Louisiana to work with a friend of mine who's a sculptor, and did that for a little while. Uh, and then I got a Oh, then Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005. I was living in Louisiana doing construction. Hurricane Katrina hit, and then I started with a friend. We started a company removing trees, you know, and then we started doing sheetrock. We had a company for that, and then David Jones calls me and he says, "Hey man, there's a job opening at Sloss. You should apply." And I said, "Dude, I've applied there 5 times already. They don't want me. I ain't applying anymore." And he said, "Yeah, but the guy that doesn't like you that did work there is leaving."
It's his job.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm like, okay. So I applied to Sloss,
Hmm.
and they said, "Yeah, we'd love to work with you. The interview is 8 weeks long." And I was like, "Okay, so I have to quit my job. I have to close my company just on the if after 8 weeks you don't like me. Okay, I'll quit my job." So I dissolved the company, moved to Birmingham, and for the next 9 years I worked at Sloss.
Mm.
I've seen it all. Like you ever see a cook? You know any professional cooks that hate to cook? They just cannot wait to finish cooking so they can serve the final product, which is the meal.
Uh-huh.
I like to cook. I like to spend time relishing in the kitchen and cooking and chilling out with people, you know. And Sloss, well, for one, burned me out.
Yeah.
But I mean, I learned a lot. But we poured iron. There was 52 pours a year on the books, and that didn't count our open studios and all the other stuff. So we added another 65. So we poured 65 times a year for 9 years, iron.
Wow.
And of course, we did bronze and aluminum, but that's 585 pours in 9 years. That's enough to burn your ass out, you know. And it's also you see everything, and you learn all kinds of stuff. Like that's the first time we were at a we used to do a bunch of road pours, and we went to a arts festival called Kentuck Arts Festival. A- And you know how sometimes when people lay the bed, they'll just they'll just pour in straight sand with a little slope, and that's it.
Yikes. Okay.
That's what we did
Okay.
because I was new and I didn't have a say in it. You know, it was like, yeah, okay, we're gonna do what y'all do,
Uh-huh.
and We did that, and after burning in, you could see the bottom door.
Yeah, like I said, yikes.
Yeah. So we were like, "What are we gonna do?" Everybody's like, "What are we gonna do?" And I said, "Well, we're just gonna drop bottom right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna throw some more hot sand, more sand in there, and do like a little cookie bed on top.
Yeah.
And we're gonna pick the hot coke up, throw that back."
Oh, what?
Oh yeah, we were burning in for 2 hours.
Yeah.
We're gonna pick the hot coke in, put it in the furnace, and start over.
Okay.
That's the kind of shit you learn when you do it, you know, 500 times.
Yeah.
Another time was banking the furnace. You ever heard of that?
Mm,
Where we would go to an art festival, and let's say we're gonna sell scratch blocks. So we would sell 3,000 scratch blocks.
1,000.
Yeah. And like 180 bowls, and we would have an iron pour at noon, and then we would shut the furnace down. We would drain all the metal out of the furnace.
Okay.
Close all the orifices on the furnace.
Mm-hmm.
Turn the blower on and force all the slag out.
Oh.
Out of the tap. Everything got to come out. So then we would take like 1-inch. We would take scratch blocks and cut them into 1-inch strips and shave them down so they would fit inside the tap hole.
Okay.
Okay. So we would shove them all the way in so they would go through the tap hole all the way up to the well to the back of the furnace.
Okay.
And then we would shut the furnace off. We'd shut the blower off and open the tweer so nothing explodes. And then 2 hours later, we would fire the furnace up again. It's called banking, where you get rid of all the molten iron and the slag, and then you let the furnace rest. So you don't have to use coke for that 2 hours that you're off. You don't have to waste all that. So we would just stick the burn-in torch a little bit, get it glowing for you. Would take 30 minutes, and then we turn the blower back on and let the blower do the rest.
Yeah.
I mean, we just learned so much stuff. And one day, I guess my goal is to do it naked at 80, with steel toes on. But
okay, at least the steel toes. Save the toes.
But I can do it. I can. That's my goal. That's my goal.
Let's make it happen.
No, well, we can wait. We can wait on.
We got time.
Yeah, 30 years.
Did somebody write this down?
Oh no, everybody knows.
Everybody already knows.
Yeah. Okay. So after pouring all that much, I mean that wears on you.
Yeah.
And I started getting osteoarthritis in my back and my wrists. And I just working at Sloss. Matt Wicker used to say, "Sloss is a young person's job, man. It's not a career job." And I started feeling it, and I decided to leave Sloss, and so I left. Then I started building furnaces for universities.
Okay.
I think I've built maybe 16 furnaces. I forget. I just lose track, but there was money in going to a university, building them a cupola with the class, teaching them how to use it, have an iron pour, and have a little talk and maybe a solo show. So I started doing that route as opposed to, being a professional artist, through making my own work. It's like, no, I'm gonna give you an experience. I'm gonna build you, we're gonna build this furnace.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I did that for a few years. Also taught safety. I taught fire watch, which is like kind of like firefighting. And I moved back to my hometown and taught, the basic first aid. The thing with the first aid is they give you there's this dummy arm, it's a dummy arm, and you have to show the class how to stitch up a cut.
Oh, is it like made out of silicone and
Yeah.
you sew through it.
Yeah. And I would get so queasy that I would pass out while I was trying to do that. So my dad suggested that I take the arm home and sleep with it, like let the arm do everything with me.
So you got comfortable with it.
Yeah, it was just a piece of plastic and not somebody's arm, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did the oil filled stuff, safety training, and then then I had a position in 2011 at a conference at Sloss in the tunnel at Sloss. I met the guy that runs Penland Iron, the Penland School of Crafts. And he wanted me to come to Penland and teach an iron casting class.
Yeah.
It took 11 years for that class to happen, but it finally happened. And that was 5 years ago, maybe. I taught a class at Penland School of Craft.
I remember that because you had Nicole Moray.
Nicole Moray. I had the two female assistants because female assistants rock.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did that. And then one of the students in the class was a local kid. His dad's family was responsible with inventing Pyrex. A big glass person.
Okay. Yeah.
Long story short, my student's dad asked me to go into business with him in a foundry in Penland, North Carolina.
Oh.
So I quit my job that I was making a lot of good money in.
Uh-huh.
And moved to Penland, North Carolina, and started up a foundry and a fabrication shop.
Okay.
And then of course we had iron pours. You know, I went over to WNC Sculpture Garden and poured metal with them, and but then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And I had to come home and take care of my parents.
Yeah.
And here I am.
Here you are today.
Well, of course we had a huge hurricane.
Recently, yeah.
8 months. But yeah, so I'm currently a guy that I met a guy in New Orleans named Max Rake Stepp. He was an undergrad at with Noah and Durant.
Okay. Yeah.
But he lives in New Orleans now, and he teaches art to high school kids. And he said, "Hey, man, there's a welding studio right across the street. I'm right across the hall from where I teach art." And so he got me in touch with the principal. I submitted a resume, and it was to teach high school kids how to weld, but how to weld for industry. And they wanted to pay me $60,000 to start with a master's. I was like, that's awesome. So I was like, you know what? I don't need this. I don't need to keep pursuing this art thing. It's been long enough. I've suffered long enough. 30 years is long enough for that. You reach a goal, you get to a point, you reach your goals, and time to move on to the next part of life. Like my arthritis is so bad to the point that I have to choose my battles. I'm gonna be getting surgery on them, but I just can't make stuff for a living anymore. It's too much. So I'm gonna teach inner city kids how to weld.
Yeah, and that's the next chapter.
Yeah, so I've finished 1 year of welding school so far, and I've got another year left.
All right.
And I thought I knew how to weld after welding for 30 years.
Yeah.
I don't know shit. Like industry and pipe welding and welding plates together and everything that we think is welding is not welding.
Wow. I have so much respect for industrial welders and structural welders and underwater welders.
It's a whole different ball game. It's nothing. I mean, like I keep getting certified in all these processes, but you have beveled plate and you have to weld it, and they cut strips out of it and then they bend it with a bender.
Uh-huh.
And if there's any rips, or sometimes they'll X-ray a weld. It's like you might think you did welding in graduate school, but you didn't really do. Not the welding that I have to teach.
I hear you.
Yeah. So that's where I am right now, and spending time with my girlfriend, and working on her camp, working on our garden, fishing, and taking care of my bees. And it's kind of funny that I worked with wax my entire career, my entire art career. I work with wax, and now I'm helping make it with the bees.
That is an interesting full circle.
Yeah.
I think
So.
Heather Spencer Holmes just cast. She had has like a Airstream trailer, and there was a hive in there, and then she just invested it, and cast it at fire, and in bronze, and it's kind of in the heart shape.
Oh wow!
And she said that when she cleans it up, she's going to reinstall it in the Airstream trailer.
Oh,
and
I love that.
Be there. Isn't that great? Yeah, she casts some great stuff.
Cool.
Super inspiring. I love her so much.
Yeah.
So that's where you are now. And I mean, you look good. You look happy.
It's good to be home. It's good to be home. And my entire art career I spent running as far away from this place as possible. But now that art doesn't matter so much, I'm fine. I'm sure one day I'll make something again, but it's not on my list of priorities at the moment.
In good time, when it's right.
Yeah.
I think we're all just trying to follow our hearts, and sometimes it gets hard and sometimes it gets easier, and it sounds like you're doing good.
Yeah.
So let's see. So I mean, you've covered everything and more, and I loved every second of it, but I like to close it out with advice. Every episode, I want to hear from our guests some sort of advice that you would have that's for iron casters. Or
here's my advice: go to med school and do art on the side. Yep, that's it.
And that's all, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, and I kind of relate to that because I'm at the point right now personally where I have a job.
Yeah, you got to.
And that pays for my fun, and it pays for my bills and my mortgage and all that stuff. And
your husband's beer money.
Yeah. And we go to Iron Pours and make art in our shop, in our garage, but I have that job.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily making art. It is in the art field. I install art.
That's awesome.
But I don't make money off of art. And I actually,
you don't have to.
I'm okay. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. So maybe that's what you're really, the metaphor that you're giving.
Yeah.
Maybe is you don't have to make your living and your money off of art.
Yeah.
You could always go to med school.
Yeah.
So folks listening, if you want to listen to the after show, you just go on over to Patreon, and we'll pick it up again tomorrow. But everybody else who's watching and listening, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to Remy's story. Remy, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Telling me all this information that I never knew, and repeating some good old stories that I had heard from Jimbo and Leanne. And
yeah, I miss those too.
And I know they miss you too. So, all right. Well, y'all have a good night. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
And everybody else, that's all, folks. Good night. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. This conversation with Remy gave me a rare glimpse into a time in the history of cast iron art that I don't know much about. I'm overjoyed to have captured these stories from his perspective, and I hope you appreciated them as much as I did. If you want to follow Remy on Instagram, his handle is SONIATDUFOSSAT. Remy, thanks again for taking the time to talk iron with me, but also your encouragement and support for this podcast is unmatched at the moment. I'll never be able to thank you enough for helping me contact so many foundational members of this community. Without your help, I don't think I would have had the validation or the gumption, for that matter, to approach and connect with most of these people. But I'm so very excited to interview these folks and immortalize their first-person accounts of how cast iron came to be used as an artistic medium. So my friend, thank you. And you watching and listening, if you like what I'm doing and are interested in supporting the podcast, go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/podcastiron. There, you'll be able to choose a contribution level that fits within your budget. Patreon supporters at any level get access to the after show recording from each episode. And this is just an extra 15 to 20 minutes with the show's guest. In this episode's after show, Remy and I swap stories about traveling to iron pores and those iron pores correspondingly sketchy accommodations. So for as low as $1 a month, you can support the show, get this extra content, and please believe me when I say even $1 will make a difference when it comes to paying for the online hosting of these interview files. Thank you to all of our current Patreon members. Your support helps me keep believing that creating this podcast is worthwhile. If you don't have it in the budget to support the podcast on Patreon, it's okay. And all I ask instead is that you just share it with someone who you think will be interested in listening or watching. For those of you who are already sharing the podcast, please believe me, everything and anything helps. And for that, I say thank you so much. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.